Washington, D.C. is in crisis. President Trump has declared a public safety emergency, ordering the deployment of the National Guard to restore law and order in the nation's capital. According to reports, 400 troops are on the ground now, with plans to increase that number to 800 by the weekend. This emergency declaration follows a series of high-profile incidents, including an attempted carjacking that injured a former federal employee on August 3rd. The administration argues that federal intervention is necessary to combat rising crime, enforce public safety, and ensure that the Capitol remains secure. Critics, however, are raising serious constitutional and civil liberty concerns. They question whether increasing federal troop presence will actually reduce crime and whether enforcing measures like homeless sweeps and curfews infringes on individual rights. The D.C. Home Rule Act, which grants local authorities primary control over policing, further complicates the situation. In this video, we'll break down the crisis in 5 slides: the emergency declaration, the crime crackdown, the trigger event, homeless and public safety measures, and federal control with long-term plans. Each slide will provide context, facts, and expert commentary to help viewers understand the situation and its implications for Washington, D.C. and the broader U.S. political landscape. President Trump has declared Washington, D.C. a public safety emergency, citing escalating crime and security concerns. The emergency order authorizes the deployment of the National Guard, initially at 400 troops, with plans to increase to 800 by the weekend. The stated goal is to restore law and order and ensure the safety of residents, government employees, and visitors. Federal authorities have asserted direct control over security operations, signaling a robust, centralized response to perceived threats. Trump's statement, "Today is the day we take back our capital," underscores the administration's focus on strong executive action. Supporters argue that federal oversight is necessary in exceptional circumstances, particularly in a city with unique legal and political structures like D.C. Critics, however, raise concerns about the militarization of a civilian space and the potential for overreach. The deployment of troops in a domestic urban environment is highly unusual, prompting debates over civil liberties, proportionality, and the balance between federal and local authority. Historically, federal troops have only been deployed in U.S. cities under extreme conditions, such as civil unrest or natural disasters. Legal scholars caution that emergency declarations must comply with constitutional protections and ensure that police powers remain accountable and transparent. The emergency declaration sets the tone for the subsequent measures: heightened security, intensified law enforcement, and federal oversight, all designed to project authority and control in the Capitol. Following the emergency declaration, federal and local authorities have intensified crime suppression operations. In just 3 days, authorities report 66 arrests, including individuals linked to violent offenses, weapons possession, and public safety violations. Operations are now moving to a 24/7 schedule, with federal agencies like the FBI, DEA, and Park Police coordinating closely with D.C. Metropolitan Police. Weapon seizures have increased, and high-visibility patrols aim to deter criminal activity and reassure residents. Trump's messaging emphasizes a goal to make Washington safe, clean, and beautiful, framing the crackdown as both a public safety initiative and a symbolic reclaiming of civic space. However, critics argue that more soldiers and federal agents do not automatically equate to better crime control. Scholars point to the need for long-term strategies, including community policing, social services, and targeted intervention programs, rather than purely militarized enforcement. The federal presence also raises logistical challenges: coordinating between multiple agencies, managing crowd interactions, and maintaining civil order in a dense urban environment requires careful planning. Missteps could lead to civilian harm, public backlash, or legal challenges. While immediate crime metrics may show improvement, experts warn that sustainable safety depends on systemic reforms and community engagement, not just troop deployment. The current crisis was catalyzed by a specific incident on August 3rd, an attempted carjacking that injured a former federal employee. This event was widely publicized and used by the administration to justify the emergency declaration. Trump and his advisors cite the incident as evidence that crime is out of control in Washington, necessitating federal intervention. In response, 450 federal agents were deployed, including personnel from the FBI, DEA, and Park Police. These forces coordinate closely with local authorities under a centralized command structure. The administration also invoked the D.C. Home Rule Act, which allows limited federal oversight in extreme situations, to justify expanded authority. Normally, D.C. maintains its own police and public safety agencies, but the act provides a legal mechanism for temporary federal intervention. Critics argue that leveraging a single high-profile incident to implement sweeping federal measures can set a precedent for executive overreach, particularly in a city that enjoys special municipal governance protections. Legal scholars and civil rights organizations have voiced concerns about the balance between emergency powers and local autonomy. Nonetheless, the trigger event serves as a narrative anchor for the administration's actions, framing the emergency declaration and subsequent measures as necessary responses to immediate threats to public safety. As part of the emergency measures, the administration has implemented homeless sweeps, requiring residents in public spaces to move into shelters or access services provided by the city. Non-compliance may result in fines or jail time, emphasizing the enforcement aspect of the policy. According to official reports, the homeless population in 2025 stands at 5,138,000, down 9% compared to the previous year, although critics question the accuracy and methodology of such counts. The measures are highly controversial. Civil liberties organizations and legal experts have raised constitutional concerns, arguing that forcibly moving homeless individuals or imposing penalties may infringe on rights guaranteed under the U.S. Constitution. Critics also question the effectiveness of punitive approaches in addressing complex social issues like homelessness, mental health, and substance abuse. Supporters contend that clearing public spaces is necessary for public safety, urban order, and the protection of residents, framing the actions as temporary measures under an emergency declaration. However, the long-term impact on vulnerable populations remains uncertain, raising ethical and legal debates about enforcement versus supportive services. This slide underscores the tension between security measures and human rights, highlighting one of the most visible and contentious aspects of the D.C. Emergency Declaration. Looking ahead, Trump has signaled intentions to extend federal control over D.C. policing beyond the current 30-day limit, citing national emergency powers. Current law limits federal authority to 30 days of direct control, after which oversight normally reverts to the local government. Plans include drafting new legislation to extend federal authority, allowing sustained oversight in Washington for longer periods. Trump's statements emphasize the belief that under national emergency, we can act without Congress, suggesting an approach that prioritizes executive power in crisis management. Long-term plans may involve restructuring D.C.'s police command, integrating federal and local forces more permanently, and codifying emergency response protocols. These initiatives are presented as measures to ensure public safety and prevent future incidents. Although legal and political challenges are expected, critics warn that prolonged federal control could erode local governance, set a precedent for executive overreach, and spark legal battles, particularly around constitutional protections and the Home Rule Act. Balancing effective emergency management with respect for local authority remains a central challenge. Ultimately, this slide highlights the broader political, legal, and social implications of the D.C. Emergency Declaration. It underscores the tension between immediate security needs and long-term governance structures, while raising questions about executive power, civil liberties, and urban policy in the nation's capital.